What if quantum computing isn't the end of Bitcoin, but the ultimate test that proves why it exists? Every time a new technology appears, fear comes first. And that's how it was with the internet. That's how it was with smartphones. And now, it's the same with quantum. You've probably heard the phrase, when quantum computing arrives, Bitcoin is finished. It sounds technical, it sounds smart, and that's exactly why so many people accept it without questioning. But here's the detail almost no one notices. If quantum computing truly breaks Bitcoin, it breaks banks first. Governments, credit cards, payment systems, apps, private messaging, servers, and practically the entire digital infrastructure we rely on today. So why does the fear always seem to point at the same target? Maybe because Bitcoin isn't the weakest link in the chain, but the first system that exposes who actually isn't prepared. Today, I'll show you why the idea that quantum destroys Bitcoin starts from a false premise, and why, in the words of Michael Saylor himself, Bitcoin is not a static protocol, but an infrastructure capable of adapting to deep technological change. If you stay until the end, you'll understand why quantum progress may end up acting as a filter, separating fragile systems from those that truly evolve. And that's exactly where this story starts to get interesting. Before dismantling the fear, we need to understand it. When people talk about quantum computing breaking Bitcoin, they're really talking about cryptography. More specifically, the idea that an advanced quantum computer could break private keys much faster than today's machines. At first glance, that sounds alarming, but the real problem is the logical leap most people make next. Because Bitcoin is not a frozen file, it's not a forgotten vault, and it's not a system that depends on a single immutable technique. It's a living system, maintained by software, rules, and consensus. If tomorrow a computer emerges that can break today's algorithms, that doesn't create a destroy Bitcoin button. It creates an engineering problem. And engineering problems don't kill infrastructures. They force upgrades. The internet has changed encryption standards multiple times. Banking systems have done the same. Apps, servers, and protocols all evolve when real threats appear. The difference is that Bitcoin does this openly, audibly, and by consensus. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is imposed by a central authority. If a real vulnerability appears, the network can migrate to quantum-resistant algorithms, something already being researched today. And here's a detail almost no one considers. Quantum computing doesn't arrive fully formed. It doesn't appear overnight, operating at global scale. It evolves in visible stages, publicly tracked by universities, companies, and governments. That means Bitcoin wouldn't be caught off guard. It would have time, coordination, and incentive to adapt. So the question naturally changes. If Bitcoin can evolve, why do so many people treat the traditional financial system as if it were immune to the same risk? That's where the comparison starts to get uncomfortable. Once you understand that Bitcoin can evolve, the question is no longer what if quantum computing breaks Bitcoin? It becomes something far more unsettling. What happens to systems that can't upgrade easily? Here, the contrast speaks for itself. The traditional financial system depends on rigid layers, legacy banks, closed infrastructures, outdated standards, long contracts, and centralized decisions. Updating that isn't pressing a button. It means renegotiating interests, laws, regulations, and agreements between countries and institutions. When a real technological threat appears, the response isn't technical. It's political. And politics moves slowly. Now compare that with Bitcoin. The protocol doesn't need to convince a closed board. It needs to convince the network, developers, nodes, users, and miners, all reviewing the same code. When an upgrade makes sense, it's discussed publicly, tested, implemented, and adopted by consensus. That doesn't make Bitcoin fragile. It makes it adaptable. That's why Michael Saylor's statement matters. Not because he's defending Bitcoin, but because he understands infrastructure. He's not saying quantum computing is irrelevant. He's saying it doesn't choose victims based on headlines, but based on rigidity. Rigid systems suffer most when the environment changes fast. Here's the irony. Quantum fear is aimed at Bitcoin, but the real weight of that threat falls on systems that cannot coordinate globally. and cannot update their rules in the open. Seen through this lens, Bitcoin stops looking like a fragile target and starts looking like one of the few systems designed to survive deep change. And that leads straight to the core idea of this video. Because maybe quantum computing isn't a destruction test. Maybe it's a maturity test, and not every system will pass. This isn't about breaking, it's about evolving. Every major technology goes through the same ritual of fear. When the internet appeared, people said it wasn't secure. When mobile phones arrived, they said no one would trust money on them. When Bitcoin was born, they said it wouldn't survive its first crisis. Now the fear has a new name, quantum computing. But notice the pattern. Fear doesn't appear because something is weak. It appears when something becomes relevant enough to challenge the status quo. Quantum computing isn't a hammer looking for nails. It's a change in environment. And when environments change, rigid systems break. Living systems adapt. Bitcoin wasn't designed as a closed product. It was designed as an evolving infrastructure, where rules can be strengthened without erasing the past, without asking permission, and without relying on a central authority. If and when quantum computing demands adjustments, the real question won't be, can Bitcoin change? It will be, who else can change with the same speed, transparency, and global coordination? That's why Michael Saylor's perspective matters. Not because he's promoting Bitcoin, but because he understands where real risk lives. The real risk isn't new technology. It's systems that can't respond to it. Maybe the biggest mistake is trying to predict the end of Bitcoin instead of noticing how it has already survived everything that was supposed to destroy it. In the end, quantum computing doesn't ask a technical question. It asks a structural one. Who can evolve without breaking trust in the process itself? And that answer tells us far more about the future of money than any alarmist headline ever will. If this video helped you see the topic more clearly, hit like and subscribe. Here, we don't react to fear, we understand structure. And now tell me in the comments, honestly, do you think the biggest risk of the future is advancing technology or systems that can't keep up?